Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the SDGs Global Council Preparing for the Decade of Action, hosted by the World Government Summit. We are here today to mark the numerous global efforts that have been carried out by the first term of global councils which ran through 2018 to 2020. The SDGs in Action was introduced at the World Government Summit in 2016 to support the global implementation of the SDGs. As part of the World Government Summit's mission to enable and shape the next generation of government, this event will focus on the role of government in actioning the SDGs, realizing human potential for all, and building the infrastructure we need to achieve the 2030 Agenda. Without further ado, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, it is our pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Reem Al Hashmi, Minister of State for International Cooperation of the United Arab Emirates and President of the Global Councils on SDGs, to share her opening remarks.
Your Excellencies, Global Council chairs and members, distinguished guests, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the end of term session for the Global Councils on Sustainable Development Goals. Today is an important opportunity to acknowledge the moments of success that have illuminated an otherwise troubled year. It is a time to identify the triumph of our instinct towards solidarity, community, and a greater good, and a moment to recognize and celebrate you, Global Council chairs, members, and partners who have voluntarily dedicated themselves to the achievement of a better tomorrow for the world and for future generations. At the end of a year in which humanity has been challenged so widely and so forcefully, we face a choice. Do we wish 2020 to be remembered as the point at which we confronted our challenges and launched ourselves towards sustained positive progress, or as the moment from which we never could recover? If it is to be the former, then it will be, in part, thanks to the efforts of many of those joining us today on the path towards the global goals and Agenda 2030. The Global Council's initiative, which is honoured by the efforts of decision makers and sustainability advocates from around the world, and was launched as a project between the Federal Competitiveness and Statistics Authority and the UAE Prime Minister's Office, is driven by a profound belief in the power of collective action to assist the global community in achieving the SDGs. Its launch 2 years ago at the SDGs in Action event at the World Government Summit was designed to identify factors inhibiting progress towards the SDGs, to find and grant visibility to innovative solutions for their attainment, and to build a robust framework for knowledge sharing among aligned and motivated stakeholders. Today we convene to recognize the immense accomplishments of such partnerships between councils and governments, private companies, civil society groups, and individuals from all around the world. These collaborative efforts, in harness with the mobilization of international networks, development agencies, and impact investors, is answering the call to action for the decade of action. Today we continue our collective journey. I look forward to the opening of nominations for the new term of the Global Councils, 2021 to 2023, at the end of this event. And next October, I look forward to welcoming you all to Expo 2020 Dubai. Expo will be a significant opportunity, the first such opportunity in a post-COVID world, to advocate for some of the most urgent issues of our day with a captive, young, and conscious audience from the region and across the globe. At Expo, we've created dedicated pavilion experiences and moments in our program that will advance the awareness of the SDGs amongst the general public and help to shape innovative catalytic partnerships. We will host a week-long public-facing series of events on the global goals in January 2022 and invite you all to contribute to what we hope and intend will be an impactful program. Expo 2020 Dubai is our shared platform from which to grow a regional and global movement around these honorable global goals to ensure a better future for people and planet that will extend far beyond event time and speak to generations to come of our commitment to connecting minds and creating the future. Let us gather, support one another, and together step forward boldly on the road towards 2030. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is now our pleasure to share a short video that captures the achievements, determination, and collaboration of the Global Council's journeys.
أن التزام دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة بالتنمية المستدامة هو ركيزة جوهرية من ركائز رؤية الدولة لمستقبلها، وأن مفهوم التنمية المستدامة كان في صميم رؤية الإمارات 2021، وهي الرؤية التي تمثل خطة التنمية الوطنية لدولة الإمارات ككل.
I'm pleased that the Sustainable Development Goals in action has become a critical feature of the World Government Summit. The SDGs still remain a beacon of hope. It will call on us to move out of those comfort zones and embrace innovative ways of working, thinking, and leading from the front.
The SDGs provides us with the roadmap towards achieving global prosperity and well-being. It provides us with the blueprint to create more sustainable world that is more immune to global shocks. The Global Council chairs and members have adopted this mindset since the start of their journey. The findings will set the stage for an exciting World Government Summit where we will conclude their first term.
Different activities that have been led by the SDG 1 on a focused country approach to developing pro-poor policy initiatives and a competition to tackle challenges related to poverty alleviation.
Health in Your Hands platform is taking an ecosystem approach. In this ecosystems, we see that the innovations on our platform really intersect with all the other SDGs and the global councils.
It is to support teachers' resilience and ensure teachers' effectiveness. It is about supporting them also with the technology, with the right technologies, and with the right professional development.
Dubai Cares, in partnership with Paraguay Educa, developed an educational program which supports remote teacher training. The ELITE program, which stands for Educate, Learn, and Innovate through an e-platform.
Our council is developing global best practices for gender balance toolkit. The toolkit will showcase successful gender balance policies, legislations, initiatives from around the world.
Digitalization, artificial intelligence, and learning algorithms are going to be to the future of energy.
Our social, economic, and environmental challenges are mostly manifested in urban environments, and hence the SDG 11 for making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable plays an extremely important role.
وتواصل دولة الإمارات اليوم جهودها لتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة 2030 لضمان مستقبل أفضل في ظل التحديات البيئية التي لا نزال نواجهها.
Of the Council on SDG 16, I'm proud about two very different projects. Each of them addresses how to achieve peaceful and inclusive societies. One of them works with young people. The other one seeks to address SDG 16 at the government leadership level. Both are about leadership.
The recommendation on policy coherence for sustainable development provides a comprehensive standard to help countries develop necessary institutional mechanisms and policy tools to enhance policy coherence, but also to address integrated social, economic, and environmental objectives.
We believe that there's great potential for cross-fertilization of ideas by not just looking at national policy, but also looking at policy on well-being from the private sector, and interestingly from education.
Mobilize resources does not mean funding only. There are many liquidity pools to tap, many blended finance structures, but what we're lacking most is investable projects.
And in order to deliver the Sustainable Development Goal, we all need to think about actionable solutions. Delivering on these goals will require not only to robust and unite, but also to open channels, different channels of cooperation and collaboration between different stakeholders to accelerate the achievement of these goals.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, it is my pleasure to introduce the first panel titled The Role of Government in Achieving the SDGs. And now I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Cousins, President and Chief Executive Officer of the United Nations Foundation, to moderate this first session. Over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Reem, and good evening, good afternoon, good morning to you all. Let me thank the World Government Summit and the Government of the United Arab Emirates for hosting this truly timely event and express warm thanks to the Minister earlier for her opening remarks. This is a milestone moment. We are in the midst of a global pandemic that is showing us every day how interconnected we are and how much we depend on each other to overcome it. We're on the cusp of the decade of action for the delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals, which must be the North Star of our recovery. And we're marking the end of the first term of the Global Councils on the SDGs with so much to learn and to build as we look to the future. You know, since the SDGs were adopted just 5 years ago by every government on the planet, a lot of energy has gone into work private sector with civil society, academia, youth, and the role of government is so critical, if complex. We can only hope to achieve the SDGs with action and ambition from governments and from all parts of governments. And we also need governments to forge new kinds of partnerships with business and civil society in innovative ways. What role do they need to play? How can they have the most impact? What conditions do they need to succeed? Those are some of the questions we will take up now with our exceptionally distinguished panelists. Because our time is short, let me introduce them briefly. First, Her Excellency Minister Mariam Al-Mehri is the Minister of State for Food and Water Security for the United Arab Emirates. His Excellency Hugo Caceres is Minister of the Presidential Administration Unit of the Republic of Paraguay, and I am absolutely delighted to welcome them both. Let me start by asking you both to reflect just on where we are now. As you look back at the last few years, and of course the year we've just been going through, how do you assess our progress? Where are we still facing challenges? Where have you seen tangible movement forward? First, maybe to you, Minister Mariam.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody, and also a big thank you to the World Government Summit teams and all the other teams who have made this possible. It's really been a journey the last few months, but let me just reflect a little bit on how or what progress we've taken on the SDGs. As many of you may know, we have a national committee on SDGs, and this committee really makes sure that SDG targets and goals are implemented or are in the heart of every plan, strategy, policy, regulation that we have in the country. So we really embed the SDGs in everything that we do. This is number one. So we've got the political will there, and this committee also makes sure to monitor our progress as well. So every year we're having to report our targets. Now, if we look at the sector that I'm responsible for, so it's SDG 2, I'm one of the ministers responsible for it. We have to also make sure that anything we do, we report it and we sort of show them that the plan is in line with the SDGs. For example, the National Food Security Strategy, which was launched in 2018,
I think we may be having some technical audio challenges. We're having a few audio challenges, so I'm Dr. Minister Miriam, were you finished with your opening thoughts? Well, let me turn next to Minister Caceres for some reflections from you about the state of play and where you think we are today and what challenges we're facing.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good afternoon. Greetings from Paraguay. It's my pleasure to join you in this event. I just want to recall how the government of Paraguay took advantage of SDG Global Council's initiative. It was during the World Government Summit in 2018 in Dubai. The SDG4 Global Council discussed in its meeting innovative solutions to tackle the challenges facing education globally. During that event, a representative of Paraguay, the Minister of Finance, and Dubai Cares met and discussed a potential program for helping achieve SDG4. The idea was the development of an e-platform for remote teacher training and materials for e-learning addressed to students. Today, after 2 years that such a program was launched, the Meta portal is now accessible. It was developed with the partnership of a private partner called Paraguay Educa. The aim of Meta is reaching 300 schools across the country. These schools are part of a bigger project that will then extend teaching hours from 5 to 8 hours daily. 50,000 students are attending those schools from first grade in primary to the last year in secondary. The project also includes teaching materials for 9,000 teachers.
Wonderful. Let me ask each of you perhaps a bit more to go a little deeper in a couple of the goals that you're the most associated with. Minister Miriam, first, let me ask you especially about SDG 2. As you said, you're responsible for that. And to hear your thoughts on what we need to do to make real progress, how we make progress in your own country and the wider region. And I'm especially interested in where you think agricultural technology and innovative technology can play in trying to move us forward faster.
Sure. Sorry, there was a signal issue that I had. I'm not sure how much you heard of what I said before, but in a nutshell, I think it's really important to think of, I call them the 3 Ps. So you have to have the political will, you have to have a plan, and you have to have partnerships. And partnerships, I'm talking about not only partnerships between 2 countries, but you're looking at with international organizations, you're looking at also communicating with the public and with the community. It's really important when we're talking about SDG 2 and we're talking about food security, we're not just talking about how we produce food, but also on the demand side, what's the pull on food systems? Because everything that all the choices you make as a person at the supermarket or what you throw in the bin has a connection to the food security domain and then to SDG 2 as well. So it's really important to think of that aspect. I also believe that ag tech is really important because now a country such as the UAE that is water scarce, that has less than 5% arable land, what can we work on to ensure that we work on a certain degree of self-sufficiency, and that is using technology. And we're really happy to see from all the efforts that my team and I, all the stakeholders in the country have done in the past few years, is that we've really stepped up the game in the ag tech sector. And we can really see the fruits of some of the efforts that we've put in. We now have homegrown salmon, homegrown quinoa, homegrown blueberries, things that you would never imagine that could be possible in a desert. And we really want to work now towards not just being a global hub for food trade, but being a hub for technology and innovation in growing food using technology, and therefore also helping and supporting others that have the same kind of challenges that we do, and also being able to grow food domestically, thereby reducing the carbon emissions, having access to more healthier, nutritious food in that way too.
And the food issues are such a crucible of the intersection of almost everything else across the entire agenda. And I really appreciated also your observation about the wider spectrum of partnerships. We, of course, have a food system summit coming up next year as well, which will be a really important milestone for all of us. Minister Caceres, can I ask you to speak a little bit more in detail about Paraguay's experience and just a bit more about your experience of partnerships? You spoke a bit about it already, but how the government has worked with private partners to advance the SDGs.
In Paraguay, even though homes have limited connectivity, most people have access to at least one cell phone. During the pandemic, the challenge of the government consisted of making education materials available for free and through cell phone services. To address this issue, we work to articulate learning consortiums with diverse stakeholders, including public sector, telecom operators, network operators, publishers, education professionals, and technology providers, coming together to make platforms, resources, and new learning channels such as TV or radio available in response to the crisis. In a few months' time, with the help of these various stakeholders, the Ministry of Education managed to build their own virtual portal, which now is connected with other portals that help strengthen virtual education methods. Meta is one of such portals that helps the aim by providing learners of all ages to develop 21st century skills and engage in lifelong learning. Resources, online courses, and learning experiences are co-created with end users in both Spanish, but also Guarani. That's our native language in Paraguay.
Wonderful. Can I ask you both, since we are at this important milestone for the Global Council themselves, to reflect on the experience of how you've used or intersected with the Global Councils and how those platforms can be used really to accelerate the work that you're doing in your own context or to give visibility to new solutions and types of partnerships. And maybe, Minister Caceres, I'll actually start with you on this one.
Yes, in area that is extremely important to develop in Paraguay for achieving in a broader range of SDGs, especially during the decade in action, is social protection. Thus, from the social cabinet, we are working hard for developing an integrated social protection system which not only collects all the information regarding the social services that the government offers, but also can trace the beneficiaries, identifying their vulnerabilities. It also helps identify overlapped services and inefficiencies in the delivery of these services. We are building this social protection system that the aim of protecting each individual in her or his life cycle from pregnancy, early childhood, youth, and elderly life. The pandemic uncovered the limitation of the fragmented social protection programs that have been put in place, and it made clear that the social protection system that we are developing now is the right path to take, because only with an integrated and holistic approach that individuals can be effectively protected, because it takes into account the multidimensional and interconnected needs of individuals, such as need for employment, health, education, legal protection, pension system, and the like. And the like takes into account the multidimensional. So I would like to give thanks to the SDG Global Councils for offering opportunities, such as a variety of countries for promoting SDG goals across the globe. Paraguay is being benefited greatly from Global Council's initiatives and Dubai Cares. We expect continuing this further collaboration, and it supposes a significant help for addressing the SDG 4 in Paraguay. Thank you all, Elizabeth.
No, thank you. And I so appreciate, your reflection on the need to see people as their whole selves. And so many of our systems are still too fragmented. So that's part of the whole purpose of the SDGs, to create that framework where you really can look at the multidimensional aspects of the challenges we face and the challenges people experience in their daily lives, and find new ways to tackle those. Minister Mariam, let me turn to you to reflect a little bit more on the Global Council's experience and how you have used that as a platform in your own work, but also seen it with colleagues and other partners.
So for me, the Global Councils is really a platform for cooperation. This is where we convene, we talk about issues that we're facing, where we learn from each other, experiences that we've had. I mean, even when we went through the whole nutritional aspect, we spoke to a lot of countries and asked them, what have you done? What tools have you given your communities to make better choices? And I see, just going through the last few months, going through this global pandemic, that SDG 2 has in a way taken center stage. Many people didn't really think of food security before, but now understand why it's so important that we look at food security. And SDG 2 is in the core of that. So I think this pandemic has given us a bit of a shock. It's taken us off track. And I think it's really important that we use the global councils to move back on track again, because time is really not on our side. And more than ever, we feel it's really important to make use of these platforms even more, meet more frequently and discuss really underlying issues on how we can accelerate so that we can achieve the Agenda 2030.
Now, I think this point about, the calendar and the clock and time not being on our side is so important. We have 10 years. We can move mountains in 10 years, but we need to be moving them with real intention and ambition quickly. I want to ask you a bit more, about the moment we're in, because of course, as we're still in the middle of the COVID crisis, but we are seeing a path toward recovery, and governments around the world are trying to think about the recovery for their own citizens, and of course for the global economy and societies writ large. And we talk often about putting the SDGs at the heart of COVID recovery, they being our North Star. How do you see that challenge? What are some specific steps that you would advise governments to do as they think about their recovery strategies and the SDGs? And maybe Minister Mariam, I'll start with you on this one.
Okay. I think nowadays it's not about recovery anymore. It's about adapting to the new situation. I think it's very important that we now, it used to be plan, manage, recover, but now it's about plan, manage, and adapt. I think it's really important that we think this way. We have a new normal that we're getting used to now. We won't be going back to the old normal. And so keeping this in mind, I think through the past few months, I think everyone has kind of had time to reflect a little bit and also reprioritize what is now more important. And when we look at the food security domain, and in particular SDG 2, for us, the emphasis really is on looking at how we can boost domestic production using technology, how we can get local produce in the shelves of the retailers. As a lot of you know, the UAE imports 90% of the food it consumes. And so maneuvering through the challenges that we faced during the past few months was not easy, but we had the plans in place, we had the stakeholders ready, we have a strong private sector that really helped us maneuver through these hard times. And thank God we didn't face any day with any shelves empty of any of the essential food items. And so really it gave us food for thought, saying we are a little bit vulnerable because we're so dependent on the global food supply chain. And therefore, now knowing that technology is available, knowing that it's becoming more commercially viable to produce certain foods in the country, we're actually really looking to, as I said before, change the blueprint of the country to be able to grow more locally, because not only is this going to help global food systems in total, it's also going to help the community. They're going to have access to fresher, healthier foods, more nutritious food, and it's really I feel when you start growing food, and a lot of people actually through the pandemic have started growing food in their own homes, they start to respect food more and understand what it takes to actually grow food, how much water gets put into. And I usually use this example with the youth and say, when you throw away an apple, you're throwing away 70 liters of water with that apple. So it really, the kids' families are now appreciating it a lot more. They're respecting food a lot more. And we kind of have to use this situation and momentum to really drive some of the awareness and culture changes that we want to bring into our food system.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. So, Minister Caceres, can I ask you, so SDG is at the heart of adaptation, at the heart of transitioning to a better normal. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, this pandemic and also the huge challenges that we have, it makes even more important implementation of our social protection system. And regarding that, I would say that first, in our case, reducing poverty is one of our top priorities. Still, in this pandemic, is not helping us in this scenario, but also deep social transformations like the health system, especially the primary health system, and also the education transformation that we need, thinking in the SDG 4. Paraguay has one of the youngest population in the world, in Latin America, with Bolivia. So for us, the developing employment opportunities and training for our youth is extremely important. And also we need to work in the access of the pension system that only covers 2 out of 10 Paraguayans right now. So the challenges that we have are huge, but in the center of our social priorities agenda is the transformation of education. We believe that starting with the early childhood, if we start the beginning of our history, we might change everything. So that's the top of our priorities in our government, but not just our government, but also the civil society in all sectors, that we need to work together on this.
I want to thank you both so much. Those were wonderful. It's been a wonderful conversation. I fear we are out of time, but that was a wonderful exchange, I think, on which to conclude. You know, this is a session about the role of governments, and both of you in your leadership, in your day-to-day work, are showing exactly what that can and should be at a moment of such change, opportunity, and need in the world and in our communities. So thank you both enormously for getting us started so wonderfully on this session, for your commitment to the SDGs and for your insights. Let me hand the floor, thanks again to you both, back to Reem.
Thank you, Your Excellencies. Thank you, Elizabeth. We will now hear from Leila Niadi, a youth representative who is leading impact on the SDGs and its implementation. She's also a fellow of SDG 3 Global Councils and behind the Health in Your Hands initiative.
I'm Leila Aniadi, and I'm the Global Impact Fellow for Health in Your Hands, the lead initiative under SDG Global Council 3 of the SDGs in Action campaign. The initiative aims to achieve the international agreements of the UN Agenda for Sustainable Development and Universal Health Coverage. This is completely aligned with my graduate studies in public health policy and psychology, and my ultimate career goals to work on these issues in my home country of the UAE. Health in Your Hands is a global platform to incubate and promote innovative projects related to SDG 3 to achieve health and well-being for all, to the nexus of all of the other SDGs, and to provide opportunities for their visibility, networking, and connection to resources, including financing to allow them to scale. Working on the project has taught me the value of cross-sector collaboration and partnerships in fostering effective health systems. I have also gained valuable insight into the ways health innovations navigate complex systems in efforts to deliver healthcare to communities in diverse cultural settings. Also, I now have an expanded perspective where SDG 3 about health and well-being is at the center of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, but also in a holistic framework. This view is important for my future work back home in UAE and for my goal to impact the health of all people.
Thank you, Leila. Our next session is titled Realizing Human Potential for All. I take great pleasure in welcoming Elizabeth Cousins, President and Chief Executive Officer of the United Nations Foundation, who will be facilitating this dynamic conversation. Over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you again, Reem. That was a wonderful video and a perfect segue to our next session on realizing human potential for all, which is really what the SDGs are all about: human dignity, possibility, and a future for our children that is ever brighter than our past. And that is more important than ever today, as the pandemic has put so many of our gains at risk and made the decade of action even more essential to ensure human dignity for all. We have an absolutely phenomenal panel to share insights and lessons, both from the global councils and from their extensive experience and expertise throughout their careers. Let me introduce them briefly. Her Excellency Mona Almari serves as Vice President of the UAE's Gender Balance Council. His Excellency Dr. Tariq Al Ghurg is the Chief Executive Officer of Dubai Cares. Dr. Mahmoud Mohieddin, a good friend, is the Special Envoy on Financing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and Dr. Judy Kuryansky is the UN NGO representative of the International Association of Applied Psychology and a professor at Columbia University Teacher College and a clinical psychologist. I want to start this conversation with Her Excellency Mona Almari and ask about the impact of COVID-19 on gender equality and SDG 5. How has this crisis affected your fight for gender equality and rights, and how should that shape government priorities now? Her Excellency Mona Almari, do you have sound?
Do you hear me now?
We do.
Hello?
Excellent.
Thank
yes,
you, Elizabeth.
you're here.
Thank you. And thank you also to the World Government Summit for creating this important global platform. As you know, that during the uncertain times that we are all going through, collaboration and idea sharing, gatherings such as this one, help us to find innovative solutions to global challenges. All of us agree that COVID-19 crisis has shed fresh light on gender inequalities around the world. The pandemic has created unique circumstances for working women, especially working mothers. I've seen a recent A recent research done by McKinsey shows that right now, women's jobs are 1.8 times more vulnerable than men's. If we do not act immediately, then we risk increasing gender gaps and creating long-term damage across the economy and society. But I also see that international organizations and governments are recognizing the vital importance of focusing on gender equality and gender balance to ensure that we can come back from this crisis stronger than ever. This is an area where collective action is vital, Elizabeth. Governments, I think, should look at this and look at two things during this pandemic. First, they must ensure that women's voices are actively included when decisions are being made on recovery planning. Women must be around the table when planning for the post-COVID. This is necessary across all sectors. Second, I also think governments should aim to put a gender lens on recovery efforts and on their planning for future crises. By this, I mean governments should see the gender impact of their policies and programs, investing early in gender responsive budgeting, gender sensitive crisis management, and gender responsive laws such as equal wage laws and childcare supports. Also, it is very important to note that SDG 5 gender equality is required to achieving all 17 SDGs. My fellow panelists are dedicated to advancing goal number 1 on no poverty, goal number 3 on health and well-being, and goal number 4 on quality education. All of our goals are interdependent. We must work together to create innovative solutions to these complex challenges. Just as the challenges are interconnected, I think also solutions must be interconnected, Elizabeth.
No, that's wonderful. And I so appreciate your starting with we can grow and become stronger than ever coming out of this crisis. And it's a real opportunity to jumpstart and accelerate so much good work that was already underway. Can I ask you to speak a little bit more about the Gender Balance Council itself and your experience there, and especially the Gender Balance Toolkit that you've designed? And you spoke about bringing a gender lens to decisions and implementation. And I imagine that comes in very, very strongly. Can you speak a bit more about that?
Sure. The UAE has always been committed to strengthening gender balance and have taken specific steps to institutionalize this commitment across all government. In 2015, the Gender Balance Council was established, and it is chaired by Her Highness Sheikh Manal bint Mohammed bin Rashid. And at the time of its founding, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and the Crown Prince of Dubai, has instructed us that the council to advance the government's gender balance agenda by driving a legislative reform. His Highness also specifically gave us a KPI to become among the world's top 25 countries in gender balance by 2021, according to the UNDP Gender Inequality Index. We make policy and legislative reforms with two intentions in mind. First and foremost, to create a more gender balanced society by closing gender gaps. And second, to become a working model in the region through advanced competitive ranking and important international reports measuring gender balance. Additionally, we have developed practical tools to enhance gender equality and create more opportunities for women to rise to leadership positions. In 2017, we've launched a gender balance guide in partnership with the OECD. This guide helps organizations to accelerate gender balance, to create more opportunities for women, and to ensure fairness of treatment between women and men. The SDG 5 Global Council is now developing a global best practices for gender balance toolkit. The toolkit will showcase successful gender balance policies, legislations, and initiatives from around the world. The toolkit will be adaptable to different country contexts, web-based, and open access. And the toolkit also has guidance and resources on advancing gender balance through economic, political, and legal empowerment of women. Importantly, also, each section has a crisis component to ensure that users are equipped with information, indicators, and country examples of how to plan for future crises. There will be information on advancing gender equality across the spectrum of rights. We recognize that without fundamental rights such as access to healthcare and education, women can't play any role in the society. I want to also highlight that the 17 SDGs have been mapped to each section of the toolkit. So alongside the tools and resources listed, users of the toolkit can see which SDG they are advancing. And I hope that the toolkit will be another resource that will help to advance gender equality and the 17 SDGs in a long-lasting way.
That sounds like a fantastic resource for everyone. And I think we now have a charge. We need a campaign for everyone to set more ambitious KPIs for themselves by 2025. Let me turn next to His Excellency Dr. Tariq Al Ghorg. And I'd like to start by, I'll ask you about education, SDG 4, the impact of the pandemic, and what you think governments need to do now to play an even more impactful role in helping enhance both quality and accessibility of education, given how much impact there's been on the world's young people. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. And I would like to thank also the global councils as well as the World Government Summit for emphasizing on SDG 4, which is quality education. Muna, why don't you join our board and you will perfect implementation of girls' education globally? I mean, the systems that you're putting and what we're doing globally with girls' education, there are a lot of similarities, but what I see, what's happening in the UAE, you're taking it to the next level and taking deep dives. So I salute you and your team of achieving all of this. Elizabeth, look, I might sound a bit negative to some sectors, but you see, COVID-19 did not hit every single home in the world. The health issue has we're now about 60 million people infected in the world. So if you divide that by 3, if each home has 3, so you're talking about 20 million homes which got affected by the virus. But if you look at education, Elizabeth, education got affected in every single home in the world, almost. If it's not every single home, it's every other home. So we're talking about billions of people got affected or has seen how education got affected. And if we want to resolve these issues, what COVID-19 did to education is it didn't change anything. It just amplified the support. We have to do much more on the existing things that we have to do. We've been talking about connectivity and access to technology and embedding it with education for the past 20 years. I don't know why we were shy about it for the past 20 years. You know, Corona came over one night, half of the world switched distance learning digital. We did it. And now we are into the second year of schooling globally, fall and onwards, and we're doing it right. So my number one thing I will tell you is connectivity and access to technology. We, as education is a human right, a child right, connectivity and technology should also be a right for children and youth around the world, especially the vulnerable children, especially girls, minorities, and disabled children. And we should not leave anyone behind. And we are supporting UNICEF launching a global initiative called GIGA, that's CAPS, G-I-G-A, which is to connect every single school in the world with internet. And we're going to launch it, hopefully announce it next week in our virtual summit, which is called Rewired. It's a global summit on education. The second is collaboration at a higher level, not only on a national level. We have to collaborate. The global agencies, the UN agencies, the global mechanism, the bilaterals, we all have to collaborate. We have the World Bank with us on this panel. They can talk more about collaboration on the higher level, how important it is. We have UNESCO on one hand, they have the learning passports, they have the Global Education Coalition that unites a lot of sectors government, private, UN agencies, non-government together, so we can solve this problem. Dubai Cares is also taking a global lead on launching a UN declaration on connectivity. And hopefully we will do that next year at Expo 2020 through our main summit that we will launch, not the virtual one, but the in-person one. And lastly, the most important thing is to bring the human back to the center of the system. We have to do the thinking, put the solutions, put the investments, and basically, if we talk about all these components, the three main aspects. One would be better teacher training, because we're going to focus on the teacher now. So we don't only train them on pedagogy, but we have to even enhance their morale, motivation, but we also have to prepare them to become school leaders, teach them on how to run a school, on how to do budgets. And once you perfect the teacher component, then we can move to the next level.
No, that is fantastic. I love putting people at the center is something we obviously heard also in the last panel so profoundly. And what I'm hearing from both of you is also just in your lived experience and everything you've been doing and that your colleagues are doing. We have solutions, we have pathways, we're getting really critical things done, and we're now moving at an accelerated pace. And we can actually get to the SDGs by 2030. Mahmoud Mohieldin, I want to turn next to you, and including on this question that we just heard about broader collaboration across the international system. It's obviously been, your career has been very much about that. But can you speak about especially the kind of underlying issues of poverty, of financing, of how we bring some of these threads together through that lens as well? And what do governments need to prioritize now as we come out of this crisis?
Right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm very happy, pleased, and honored to be among this distinguished panelists. And I like what Her Excellency Mary mentioned at the beginning about the interconnectedness of the SDGs at large. And actually, in the case of SDG 1, we're ending extreme poverty, I would add the dependence of the performance of ending extreme poverty on efforts and outcomes and performance of what we see on the rest of all of the SDGs. We cannot end extreme poverty if we don't really have a good health system, good quality education, good investment in infrastructure, without really putting sustainability and environment as a priority, without governance, and without partnerships. So this is basically the summary of the 17 goals that should be reflected on the extreme poverty. And actually, good work in these aspects have managed really to help us do very well in reducing extreme poverty in the world. Just the figures, back in 1993, the world was around 5.3 people, and the number of the extremely poor were around 2 billion, or to be exact, 1.9 billion. In the year 2017, we're around 7.5 billion people around the world, and the number of the extremely poor fell below 690 million people. What happened during the last few months is a shock to the system. And unlike the projections before, unlike the big expectation that we can really put extreme poverty on track and try to achieve the 2030 agenda, for the first time since 1998, we have seen the number of the extremely poor increasing. According to the World Bank figures, the number has increased between 90 million to 115 million. And with the continuation of the same kind of impact on the livelihood, the loss of jobs, the number could increase by an additional figure to get us into the neighborhood of 9.5% of the world population to be suffering from extreme poverty. What can we do about that? I think, as put with my good friend and member of the council, Carolina Sanchez, when we spoke about inequality it's very much a political choice. Fighting poverty is a political choice, as fighting inequality is a political choice. Yes, we are facing some shocks, unprecedented shocks, but prioritizing the effort in dealing with extreme poverty, hand in hand with dealing with matters related to inequality. And I like, again, what was mentioned earlier related to education, especially education of girls, and putting gender at the center of the discussion. That would be very much helpful. But to your point about how can we do that, we're talking about huge investments. Either use the term recovering back better or recovering forward better, as the managing director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, always like to mention, because many countries really may not really like to go back. They like to go forward because that back was not really that good anyway. So what we need really to do is to invest. And to invest here requires funding. And to be very brief about that, we need to do three things. First, to prevent two bad things from happening. We need to prevent a crisis in debt. And we need to prevent the leakage in the system of finance through illicit financial flows. That needs to end now. Meanwhile, we need to enhance the support of funding by going back to the principles of public-private finance, encouraging the private sector to do its job while prioritizing spending where it really matters. This requires very good coordinated effort, and I'd like to refer you to the good work and initiative by the Secretary General and the Prime Ministers of Jamaica and Canada, with big participation from around the world in how to deal with that in a time of crisis. So the solutions are there. It's all again about the political will to get that into action.
And we heard about political will in our earlier session as well. Pathways, partnerships, and decisions to prioritize the right things. I want to ask now, Dr. Judy Kuryansky, you chaired the Global Council on Health. And I'd love to hear a bit from you about the initiative that team has launched this year, what takeaways you have to share. And if you can, in that context, also reflect a bit on mental health. That's obviously your longest professional commitment. And it's a comparatively neglected issue. And we know how critical it is. So how do we also elevate some of those critical mental health issues on our agenda as well?
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. Definitely, as a psychologist, I'm very sensitive, having been involved in the negotiations for the SDG agenda way back when, starting in the beginning and putting well-being in the title of SDG 3. So it is health and well-being, and including promoting mental health and well-being in the target of 3.4. Exceptionally important. And what's critical is that so many people are suffering from post-traumatic stress, as they will, ongoing from this pandemic. But there is also, from a psychological point of view, what we call post-traumatic growth. Even the UN Secretary General has mentioned this last week at the UN General Assembly special session on COVID-19 and going forward, which we have an opportunity to really learn from the lessons and for everyone to move ahead in this decade of action to help people to recover, not only, and to become more empowered and to feel more resilient and to feel strength from what's actually happened. And the SDG, to tie this into what the SDG Global Council 3 has been doing, which is very exciting, is our project and our initiative called Health in Your Hands that you heard Leila speak about. This is a platform where we are bringing to the forefront the innovations about health, which really overlap all the other global councils that we've talked about in the SDGs, because we do see this as a nexus and as a coordinated kind of agenda moving forward. Education, we just heard about, eradicating poverty, gender equality, all of this comes together with health. And at this platform really are innovations around the world that actually promote health and bring health to those left furthest behind. So for example, One of them that really shows the PPPs, the public-private partnership, is Village Reach. So what do they actually do? They use new technology, such an important part of the UAE and everything that is being done at the UAE with the innovation and new ideas. So this is the NGO. They bring together the governments of Malawi, for example, and Mozambique, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and private sector with Swoop Aero, bringing the ideas of these drones that will bring information to the people and reach those furthest behind. So you see, partnership is really critical in both our innovation and in the whole agenda, as you've talked about and everyone has mentioned here.
So, this is such a wonderful conversation. We have so little time, and I just would love to continue with you all for much longer because this has been such a rich set of insights that you've all offered. I'd like to just conclude us with one very fast lightning round question to all of you. We're about to start a new year. It's the actual start of the Decade of Action. And if you had one word or one phrase that you want every government to take to heart as we enter this new year, I'd love to hear from you what that is to round out our discussion. And let's go in reverse order. Judy, what's the one word that you would want all governments to hear from you?
I think focusing on working together. It's been called multilateralism, but it's really working together that brings love and hope to all.
Wonderful. Tariq Al-Ghurb, to you.
Sorry, I was just switching my mic on. With me, it's if we're seeking paradigm shift, let's rewire education.
Excellent. Rewiring education, solidarity. Mahmoud.
Well, as we still live in uncertainty, the only way to go about it is to build the bridges of trust across nations. So I think it's a revival of the role of multilateralism with a rule-based system, with good solidarity and good trust among the main players to help the extremely poor.
Wonderful. And Almari, you have the final word.
I think the key to unlocking the world-changing potential of the 2030 Agenda is through partnership, dialogue, and innovative action. Innovation is key in the coming years. And I believe that the COVID-19 crisis has inspired all of us to prioritize gender equality in a sustainable way. Thank you.
Well, thank you to you all. You've given us such rich insights about all the different ways we can truly put human potential first. You've shown what is possible. You're telling us what is already being done and what we need to accelerate to go forward, not back. I love that phrase, and to do that together. So I want to thank all of you again for all of your leadership, what you do every day in the world, and keep on doing it. And we now get to turn back to the rest of our program, and I hand the floor back to Reem. Thank you again to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellencies and distinguished panelists. It was such an insightful discussion. The pandemic has created several challenges. However, with the unleashing of limitless potential that lies within each and every one of us, by working together, we can all create an abundance of opportunities. We will now hear from Mohammed Al-Imam, Fellow of the SDG 11 Global Council, to share his thoughts on the future of work we want.
Over the past 2 years, I had the opportunity to both work and learn from some of the top minds, decision makers, thought leaders propelling the progress of the SDGs in general and specifically SDG 11. And I aspire to continue to do so. It is often highlighted that the two trends that will continue to prevail over the next few decades are sustainable development and digital transformation. And that's how I've been trying to position my career, at the nexus of utilizing exponential advancements in technologies for the purpose of sustainable development. I'm privileged to have had the opportunity to constantly vet the values of digital transformation strategies against the core values of the Sustainable Development Agenda in cities across the world through my work with Smart Dubai, the SDG 11 Global Council, and many other personal capacities. I had the honor to work on the Arab SDGs Report 2020 and explore key issues facing Arab youth in the region. And I had the pleasure of exploring key futuristic issues such as the future of work and education through Smart Dubai's work and the collaboration with the Digital Future Society in Spain. I hope everything I've mentioned inspires youth around the world to take part and bring forth their energies and ideas.
Thank you, Mohammed. Youth is indeed an essential foundation for achieving the Agenda 2030. Our next session is titled Building the Infrastructure We Need. I take great pleasure in welcoming Malik Al-Madani, Director of Strategy and Future Department of the Federal Competitiveness and Statistics Center, who will facilitate this panel. Over to you, Malik.
Good morning, or can I say good evening or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world. It's a pleasure to have you here with us in this hopefully going to be a very interesting panel discussion about building the infrastructure that we need. I'm truly honored to be in the presence of our distinguished panelists. I'd like to introduce them to you. We have His Excellency Dr. Adnan Amin, former Director General of IRENA and the Global Council Chair of SDG 7. We have as well Her Excellency Dr. Aisha bin Bishr, former Director General of Smart Dubai and Global Council Chair for SDG 11. Your Excellencies, thank you for being here. It's an honor to have you here with us. And I'd like to start with a question for both of you. What role did the SDGs Global Councils play in facilitating and achieving the SDGs? I hope, Dr. Adnan, you don't mind, but I'd like to start with Dr. Aisha bin Bishr. Ladies first.
Thank you, Imam, for having us, Malik, for having us here. The world is becoming increasingly urbanized. During the past decade, more than half the world's population has been living in cities, and that share is projected to rise to 60% by 2030. With more than 80% of the global GDP generated in cities, urbanization can contribute to sustainable growth if managed well by increasing productivity, allowing innovation and new ideas to emerge. However, cities also consume 2/3 of global energy consumption and account for more than 70% of greenhouse gas emission. The impact also of COVID-19 has been most devastating in poor and densely populated urban areas, especially for the 1 billion people living in informal settlement and slums worldwide, where overcrowding also make it difficult to follow recommended measures such as social distancing and self-isolation. Many cities around the world are facing acute challenges in managing rapid urbanization, from ensuring adequate housing and infrastructure to support growing populations, to confronting the environmental impact of urban sprawl, to reducing vulnerability to disasters. And as you all know, and as part of the UAE's effort to accelerate the implementation and increase the worldwide impact of the SDGs, the country has established the Global Councils on SDGs to be unique network for decision makers from public and private sectors, non-government organizations, and academia who are working together to share cutting-edge practices, discuss the creative implementation of the SDGs, and build a new partnership between countries and organizations. In line with that, and to further highlight the importance of cities, the SDG 11 Global Councils was formed to formulate pragmatic multi-stakeholders widely applicable SDGs solutions for cities and to implement selective pilot initiatives by utilizing the formulated framework. The Council continues to strive to find innovative solutions for SDG 11 implementation, and the aim is to provide actionable insights, propose policies, develop technological solutions, and mobilize resources to drive progress towards our goals.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So if I move to Your Excellency, Dr. Adnan, if I ask you the same question.
Thank you, Malik. And let me start by saying I was really honored to chair the SDG 7 Global Council. And I have to pay tribute to the vision of the founders of the World Government Summit and its leaders for establishing this, and also the convening power of the World Government Summit, because we were able to bring together an extraordinary range of people to discuss the future of energy and SDG 7. And this included large corporations, SMEs, NGOs, scientific actors, international organizations, to discuss what the key challenges are, launch the initiatives that can make a difference, and to analyze where we are going as a world in order we can meet the SDGs in the coming time. And we've had a lot of discussion on that already. We looked at a number of things. For example, energy poverty is still a critical issue. There are almost 1 billion people without access to modern energy services. It cripples their lives. And we discussed the possibilities of business models for off-grid electrification and mini-grids. And we had some very interesting startups and NGOs working with us on that. As a result of that, we've seen a multiplication of platforms for pay-as-you-go solar in African countries that has proliferated throughout the African countries. We have measurable metrics in terms of successes of electrification, rural electrification with off-grid capabilities. But the most exciting thing has been the mini-grid application, and with mini-grids achieving a business case in more and more countries, and you can electrify small towns of up to 20, 30,000 people with mini-grids and solar and batteries in an affordable way when we know that the grid infrastructure is not going to reach. So this is changing people's lives, and many of those actors involved in the council are part of this. We discussed a very important issue, which was the electrification of rural health centers, especially in Africa and Asia. It's a huge problem because these health centers don't have refrigeration for vaccines. They don't have power for sanitization of operating instruments and for operating theaters. And there was a discussion about how off-grid solar could potentially be a solution to this. And I'm pleased to tell you, and largely as a discussion that we had there, the WHO is today supporting a program for several thousand rural health centers to be able to access reliable power and to change the health status of people in rural areas. So real impacts happening. We had an expert on hydrogen. Those of you who follow the energy debate today and the decarbonization debate will know that hydrogen is going to be a major part of our energy mix in the coming decade or more. Investments are happening now. Some of the leaders of thinking around innovation and technologies on hydrogen were part of our council. We have been involved in discussions with private sector since, working with companies that are building electrolyzers, reducing the cost of electrolyzers, making the capacity for green hydrogen a reality for the future. This is happening. This is not something should happen, it's already happening. And we saw this also in our discussion with those who were involved in the electric vehicle and battery part in our discussion. And as a result of that, we've been engaged with a lot of companies that are pioneering on EVs. We are poised today for a boom in EV sales. This is now the largest sales in the largest markets in the world, portion going to electric vehicles. And the cost and innovation around battery design has come down substantially. And we discussed renewables and grid infrastructure. So a lot of the discussion that happened 2 years ago, we couldn't imagine would have had the impact that it did today, and for it to enter the mainstream of energy and the future of energy.
Thank you, Doctor. So if I can move to Her Excellency, Dr. Ashib bin Bashir. Can you shed some light on the multiple initiatives that Global Council 11 has launched, whether on the national or the global level?
Sure, Malik. Our SDG 11 Global Council, in its first phase, has formulated and published a concise, pragmatic, and customizable high-level framework for the implementation of SDG 11 by cities. The framework has 4 simple steps and also incorporates various enablers for successful implementation of SDG 11 in cities. The framework is now available in our SDG 11 Council website, www.sdg11gc.com, for cities to download and utilize in their SDG 11 implementations. And many city managers found this very helpful because it's a simple framework and straightforward. And in our council's second phase of work, from late 2019 till now, we have identified and commenced work on 4 targeted action items. The first action item, titled Cities Twinning Program, entails matching developed and aspiring cities to encourage voluntary exchange of information and knowledge pertaining to specific urban topics. Certain cities tend to exceed in particular areas of sustainability and implement successful solutions. So this program allows such cities which demonstrate success to help other aspiring cities by providing them with ideas and high-level support where needed. The second action item, titled City Solutions Repository, entails sharing successful solutions and best practice implementations among cities which move the needle in achieving SDG 11 targets. We aim to work closely with UN Habitat and help enrich their global best practices platform by bringing open and agile smart cities, OASCs, and other cities' urban best practices to it. The third action item is a novel idea to create a financial accelerator for cities, which we have called Financelator. And we know that financing such solutions is so difficult for those aspiring cities. It aims to help cities formulate their SDG 11 related urban ambitions and funding requirements in a structured manner to facilitate and ease the process of obtaining finance. We aim to build this, the world first virtual Financelator, and pilot it during the Expo Inshallah in Dubai next October 2021. Last but not least, we are also planning to conduct a post-COVID-19 SDG 11 implementation virtual forum later this year, within the next 2 or 3 weeks, and invite thought leaders, decision makers, thinkers, practitioners, various UN agencies, and our council members to discuss the SDG 11 landscape in our new reality. As an output, our council aims to publish a City Insights report highlighting the new challenges for SDG 11 in a post-COVID-19 world. We hope this will help cities to identify and also address their challenges in a changing world. I'd like to reiterate that all our action items are implemented through strong global partnership capitalizing on existing global network and institutions. We are very well aware of the urgency of SDGs, and strong partnerships are critical for that.
Thank you, Dr. Asha. Moving back to Dr. Adnan, how did the COVID-19 inspire cities to cater for providing affordable, sustainable energy for all?
Well, you know, I think that the twin shocks of the COVID pandemic, together with the worsening trends of climate change that we are seeing today, has really forced a rethinking of many of the policy frameworks that we have for energy, for sustainability, for management of cities. And I think that the mantra now has become that as we recover from these crises, we need to build back better, build back better. And building back better in as far as cities and energy is concerned, I think that there are 3 key areas where we're going to have to focus. One is that the future of energy for cities is going to be much more decentralized. It's going to be much more digitalized, and digitalization and AI are going to play an increasing part in virtually every aspect of development of energy, and particularly of the management of cities. And decarbonization is going to become a premier focus of how do we achieve an energy future that doesn't take us to above 1.5 degrees centigrade climate change warming. So this is a huge challenge, but what we are seeing are so many encouraging shoots. As far as energy and technology are concerned, we know that the future of energy is going to become increasingly electric. Electricity is going to become a principal energy carrier in the future. That a large part of this electricity is going to be renewables, that renewables are now the cheapest source of power in the world. And by 2025, or before, in my view, 2025, we will have the majority of share in power generation coming from renewables, so leading to a decarbonized source. I think the whole issue of transportation within cities and movement of people within cities will become a critical issue. So electrification of transport, autonomous mobility, management of zones for transportation are becoming increasingly important to how cities of the future will function. And I think the encouraging thing there is that we are seeing that the cost of this is decreasing exponentially, and that cities will have to become smart. We will have to have smart infrastructure. We will have to digitalize the various components that make up a city. Productive elements, residential elements, transportation elements will become increasingly digitalized. We have huge advances in the application of AI and learning algorithms and how to manage these various parts of urban development. And we're seeing now that as digitalization increases, the importance of efficiency comes to the fore. Efficient buildings, energy efficient transportation. And there are many cities that are now beginning to pioneer these. I visited, for example, the Singapore Smart Port, probably one of the biggest ports in the world, which is being totally digitalized with autonomous loading, unloading, and smart meters installed throughout the port, with intelligent systems managing in a much more efficient way the traffic. And I think that this is really going to be at the center of how we manage the cities of the future. The good news is that it's not necessarily more expensive. In fact, it's economically advantageous to move in this direction. There's a perception in some circles that digitalization is only for the rich. It's not. If we see how innovation has happened, for example, in a number of African countries today, in my country, in Kenya, we were pioneers in fintech. The M-Pesa app, which became the precursor for all the money transfer apps that you see around the world, was developed in Kenya by a Kenyan young entrepreneur. If we can, with mobile telephony, with the application of the internet, do all of these things in developing countries, we can leapfrog the polluting and inefficient structure of cities of the past and move into a new future for cities. And I think this is the great hope that we have.
Thank you. Dr. Adnan, if you don't mind, if I want to ask you as well a question, where do you think, or how do you evaluate the UAE when it comes to SDG 7? What more can be done further until we arrive to the year 2030, the year where hopefully the world will perform far better when it comes to the global agenda?
Well, it's a huge challenge, but the good news about the UAE, and I had the privilege of living here for some years, is that it's a very foresighted view of how the country can look in the future. It's a very foresighted view and a unique view for an oil-producing country that has become wealthy as a result of oil to look at a post-oil future. This is a very, very encouraging sign. And I think that, for me, the greatest achievements have been, one, the emphasis the leadership has had on educating its youth. You see remarkably well-educated, confident, young people looking at their future with great anticipation. And the second is that the application of the leading edge technologies around the world coming into the UAE market is making a huge difference. The UAE has, some of the most innovative solar projects in the world. Some of the largest solar farms in the world are here in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi. And that's in an oil-producing country because they know that the future is going to be different. I think that there's still much more investment required in skilling an adequate workforce that can manage a digitalized future in the way that the ambition is, because it's a huge ambition. You need the infrastructure to make it happen. You need the ecosystem of people and institutions and capabilities to make it happen. But I think it is going in an extremely exciting direction, and the UAE, in my view, is one of the pioneers in this endeavor.
Thank you for great insights, Dr. Adnan. Dr. Aisha, I'm very interested really to know about the Financial Accelerators initiative that the Global Council on SDG11 has been working on. Are there any of the cities here in the UAE that are going to be part of it, or even in the region?
We hope actually that some of the cities in our region and also in Africa to utilize such a tool. And that's why we will be launching it during the Expo 2021, wherein it will be a great platform to meet other cities and other nations and showcase to them how such a tool can accelerate implementing SDG 11 goals. As you know, Malik, the most difficult part for cities is to get such kind of financing tools to their projects, especially infrastructure projects. And we hope that this tool will allow them to accelerate such kind of implementation.
Thank you, Doctor. And so, Your Excellency, since we're coming close to ending the session, I'd like to ask you both, how would you reflect on your journey while working on the Global Council's initiatives on SDGs? So, Dr. Adnan, if I may hear from you.
It was fascinating because it started in the World Government Summit, which is a collection of some of the most innovative thinkers around the world on all manner of things, from autonomous driving to the future of energy, to the future of education, to how cities would look in the future. And to cull from that ecosystem a group of people focusing on energy in that broader context was very exciting, because we got people who were talking 2 years ago about things that we are beginning to see happening now, people with the foresight and ideas. So it's been a fascinating journey, and I'd like to congratulate the leadership and my friend Abdullah Luta. I don't know if he's listening, but he did a great job in bringing all of this together. But it was really a seedbed for thinking, for innovation, and I was very excited to be part of it, and I wish you the best for the future.
Thank you, Dr. Adnan. Your Excellency, Dr. Aisha.
Same to me, wallahi, Malik. When they nominated me for this council, I was a bit hesitate how I can formalize this council, but it was so refreshing to see how much people just jumped to help and support and bringing formatting the council and bringing all these ideas together. In the last 2 years, I met amazing people who made this council a reality. And again, I thank UAE leadership for bringing up such kind of initiative to support a global great goals.
Thank you both for such a great session. Thank you for the insights. It's been such a pleasure to have you here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of the session. I'd like to hand over the mic.
Thank you, Dr. Aisha, Adnan, Malik. It was such an insightful session, understanding the importance of building the right infrastructure in various sectors for humanity to progress collectively and sustainably. We will now hear from Sushmina, a youth representative who is leading action for the implementation of the SDGs. She is also a fellow of SDG 16 Global Councils and the We for Change program.
Namaste. I'm Sushmina Baidya, coming to you from Kathmandu, Nepal, a land of 126 ethnic communities building a home together. When I was leading an organization before change from 2017 to 2019, we were focused on youth civic engagement for peace building as one of our primary strategic goals. This was because Nepal election 2017 was creating a landmark in the political history of our country. However, the journey of reaching to Nepal election was not an easy one. After a monarchy was abolished in 2006, Nepal underwent 10 years of political transition that included riots, violence, conflicts, and displacement. So when the time of election was coming around, we thought there was a great need of raising awareness around the election of our Nepal. We believe that young people would create a stir in the political discourse of our country. So with the help of Peace First Mini Grand Challenge, we organized 2 days of intensive workshop with young people from Province 2 and 3, where we raised awareness about good governance, democratic practice, and electoral system through the use of sports. The implementation of this project in such a magnitude only helped us to realize that there is a great importance of building an inclusive society. Currently, I'm working as the regional manager and fellow in residence for Asia Oceania at Peace First. Each day I wake up to witness how young people are taking actions from their part of the world to create a better home for individuals. Be it a young person from India taking actions to map out UNSCR 2050 in his country, or a young person from Afghanistan teaching hundreds of children about peace education. Each of these initiatives helps me to realize that every individual can take up their part to promote inclusion and respect towards different ethnic communities. Each of these initiatives inspires me to realize that a life with dignity is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushmina. Our next session is titled, The Way Forward, How Do We Get There? I would like to hand over to our facilitator for this session, Malik Al-Madani, Director of Strategy and Future Department at the Federal Competitiveness and Statistics Center. Over to you, Malik.
Good evening, or shall I say good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this session. Where we're going
I
to
don't
talk
hear
about the way
anything.
forward.
Sorry. I have no sound. Sorry.
I hope that my sound is clear.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So I'm very proud here to be with very distinguished panelists. We have here Ms. Simone Filipini, President of Leadership for SDGs, former Dutch ambassador and former executive director of Cordaid and NIMD. We also have with us Dr. Robert Biswas-Diener, the Global Council Chair on Wellbeing. And we have Mary Amy from the Managing Director of Impact-Based Finance from Societe Generale, who's also the Global Council Chair on Financing. Thank you all for being here, and I'd like to start with Ms. Simone with the first question. How should governments, businesses, and civil society think about partnerships for the SDGs going forward, reflecting on the last 5 years?
No volume.
Mr. Mon, are you able to hear us?
No. Fuck it.
So then maybe until the technical issue is resolved with Ms. Simon, we're gonna move to Dr. Robert. Dr. Robert, I have few questions to you actually. COVID-19 has had several implications on the well-being of communities worldwide. So has the pandemic been an awakener on how we can do better?
I think it has been an awakening. A lot of people talk about there being a silver lining, but I think that that suggests that what we've experienced is a rain cloud. And I think something more seismic has happened. That is, I think we've endured an earthquake that has shaken global society. It's exposed some of our foundations, particularly inequalities. And I think that we have an opportunity, sort of post earthquake, to look at how, what, where, and when to rebuild. That is, to remake society. And I've been encouraged in seeing shifts, tectonic shifts in how we approach old ways of doing things. The uptick in telehealth service delivery, the increase in telecommuting, and an increased recognition that people in some sectors can work effectively and productively from home. We've been asking fruitful questions about how we train and support policing, how we deliver education, and so forth. So I do view this as a real opportunity.
Great. And if I may ask you as well, Dr. Robert, what are the key priorities that you believe should be addressed in order to achieve the SDGs? And also, what key challenges will we face in the next few years when it comes to well-being, and what do you believe should be done?
Well, in terms of key priorities, as a well-being researcher, you'll find it no great surprise that I think that well-being should be our priority. And I encourage policymakers to establish and adopt formal well-being frameworks, to think about the measurement of these frameworks, and then ultimately to use these frameworks as an overarching lens by which to evaluate other policy priorities. I think when we put well-being front and center, we still get to focus on commerce and energy and the environment. But what we do is we offer a framework for diverse ministries and departments to coordinate and collaborate. In terms of challenges, I think that it's a psychological phenomenon. I think when people's livelihoods and health are threatened, as they are now, people ultimately adopt a scarcity mentality, and this leads to short-term thinking rather than long-term thinking. I think that's problematic for environmental and other reasons. And I think that when people have a scarcity mentality, they're less accepting and less collaborative of other people, especially those they view as different from themselves. So what we need to do is create an abundance mentality. And although there are challenges right now, we live in a time of unprecedented mental, social, and technological capital. So I'm encouraged by these things.
Thank you, Doctor. If I may move to Mary-Amy, what are the new challenges in terms of financing the SDGs, seeing the level of the national debt increasing globally due to the COVID-19? And what are the innovations possible in this respect? And did businesses do enough when it comes to financing SDGs?
Thank you. Yeah, indeed, the challenges are huge, and with the trillions that have been invested to react to the COVID crisis, states have very little to no flexibility in taking on new debt. So now it's really the time to do more with less. So less public funding, but also less resources, less negative impacts. So how do we do that? Well, we really need to have a systemic shift, as previously mentioned. So it means rethinking completely our business models, so that we focus on how businesses can achieve positive impact and better mitigate the negative impact of their activities. It means taking a holistic approach and looking at all possible additional positive impact that can be provided by any services and or products provided by companies, and by promoting business models that are both profitable, so that they are sustainable in an economic way, but also sustainable for the people and for the planet. So in fact, what we need to do now is quite challenging, which is to bring on an impact-based economy, an impact-driven economy. And it looks a bit overwhelming, but if we look at the COVID crisis we're still in the middle of facing, we can notice that companies and citizens, they have reacted quite efficiently at the crisis, and they've been quite agile and disruptive in finding solutions and rearranging the production lines when driven by a common goal. And often they've been more reactive, in fact, than governments themselves. So I strongly believe that if we are able to maintain this disruptive mindset and maintain also this collaborative mindset that has been that has emerged to fight the crisis, and keep that momentum, keep that mindset for the recovery period, and to bring it to fruition by focusing on achieving the goals, the sustainable development goals, and by bringing on new business models that are impact driven, we have a chance, an opportunity to accelerate the pace of change and to bring the scale of change that is now needed if we want to achieve the SDGs in the next decade. So it's really about keeping this momentum, bringing more disruption in the businesses themselves. And what we can see from my day-to-day work, working with companies and banks and investors, is that the private sector is really ready to take on this challenge. So it needs to be pushed a bit more. And I think initiatives like the SDG councils are great ones, like many other coalitions and collaborative initiatives to bring this forum and this disruptive mindset to engage with all actors in the economic system.
Mariam, if you allow me also to ask you further, so what can the government really do, or how can it facilitate the encouragement for the private sector to be a part of the solution when it comes to financing the SDGs?
Well, obviously, policies and leadership, and Simon will speak to this much better than I will. They are essential to provide guidance. For example, by putting minimum thresholds in order to raise the bar as to how companies and businesses manage the negative impacts related to their activity, and also to raise the bar as to the protection and the that is provided to their employees and the other stakeholders, as well as to, of course, the level of carbon emissions, for example, that are derived from their activity. So we have seen that, for example, in Europe with the EU taxonomy that is aiming at doing this, at harmonizing and raising the bar in terms of levels. And then another way, which I strongly believe in of catalytic impact that the government can have, is in the way it is spending its budget. And in particular, instead of, for example, giving subsidies, looking at providing first-class funding to blended finance structures where private finance can be mobilized, and where more funding, in fact, will be achieved on the same amount of public money that is made available.
Thank you, Mary-Amy. Ms. Simone, are you able to hear us now?
I'm finally there. Yeah, thank you so much. And I could follow most of you, but it was really strange. But anyway, I'm there. Yeah.
Great. So then, Mary-Amy, Ms. Simone, can you please tell us how can the partnership really happen between government, businesses, and civil society when it comes to implementing the SDGs work going forward towards the year 2030?
Okay, thank you so much. Well, a lot has already been said this afternoon about partnerships and basically everything related to leadership positions of those partners in those partnerships. So I think it's beyond any question that partnerships are crucial to achieve the SDGs. But we have to really look into this because the SDGs are not going into the right direction. Many of them are lagging behind and some are in reverse, despite the fantastic initiatives taking place all over the world. Innovations, responsibility of private sector, NGOs, and certain also a number of governments taking the lead. But in many cases, it doesn't happen. And COVID has laid bare some really crucial systemic weaknesses in systems all over the world, in countries, leading to an enormous increase in poverty, hunger, exclusion, further inequalities in this world. And it's contrary to the goals and objectives of the SDGs. So if I look at the issue that Maria May just mentioned, which is about financing for development, we see that there was a gap of 75 trillion US dollars between the 90 trillion needed and the 15 supplied by institutional donors. That gap is not going to be filled unless there will be an enabling environment for institutional investors to invest. As somebody before, I think in panel 1 or 2 said that investable opportunities and projects are needed, and there are not enough of them. So there is not, so in those countries who need it the most, the least of funding is available. And why is that? Because those funders need an enabling environment in which they have a return on their investment and in which their investments are safe. And that means a properly functioning rule of law, security, well-functioning institutions, proper taxation system, regulatory frameworks, etc. And also inclusive and socioeconomic policies. There's a huge gap between what is needed and what is being done. And why is that gap there? Not because all leaders of countries don't want to do the right thing, because they have all committed to do the right thing. But I spoke to a number of government leaders and they confirmed basically what I saw myself with my experience, and that is that in countries with low institutional capacities, government ministers often lack the support they need to do their jobs well. Leading a ministry in such a complex time in a country with low capacities is a hell of a job. It's a huge responsibility and a huge challenge. And ministers need support. And that support is not coming. So there's a lot of, if you look at the language in this, in all our circles where people are talking, they say, countries should do this, this should be done, that must be done, we need to do this, we have to do this. But it's humans who are at the core of this issue. It is ministers and governments at all levels driving and leading for change. It's about systemic change, and that is really hard to achieve. So that's why I established this Leadership for SDGs initiatives, which I'm proud to say is part of the Global Council on SDG 16, led by Helen Clark, who, by the way, was at the base of the SDGs establishment as such. And I just want to ask a question. Why is it that all CEOs and boards of companies are being trained and coached and supported? And everybody thinks that this is a fantastic idea and crucial for their performance. And nobody takes care of governments. So governments basically are left to their own devices. And that's what I want to change with Leadership for SDGs. And I would also like to hear Maria May's view on this, how she looks at this, because all the issues that have been talked about today, all the different SDGs, whether it's well-being or health or education or clean energy or climate measures, we need proper governance. We need proper policies. We need policy coherence. We need implementation of those policies. And we need things to be done. That's the basics. And the basics are not enough being taken care of. So that be my contribution for now, and I would of course be really happy to engage in further discussion. And for me, it's 5 to 12. And it's interesting, when I was in Dubai last year, I saw on some wall in a government building, 2030 is now. And I agree with that. 2030 is now. We should have started building better leadership and governance 30 years ago, 50 years ago, but the future is now and we have to start building it.
Thank you, Simon. I'd like to also hear about the initiative Leadership for SDGs, but I'd just like to move to Dr. Robert, and I'm going to come back to you as well, Simon, on this one. So, Dr. Robert, if I may ask you, when it comes to the well-being of communities, how do you think the governments in the region, if you can also speak about the government of the UAE, what role can they play to ensure that there are effective efforts when it comes to increasing the well-being of the communities here in the region?
It's a difficult question to ask, especially because community development is going to be context specific and vary region to region in terms of things like, bicycle commuting or things that we know could be helpful in one society won't directly transfer to another. But we know a great deal about how to design cities for social support and social interaction, to minimize commute times, to find opportunities to put people in proximity to green spaces and put people in the public sphere where they can interact with one another, build trust in one another. And I think ultimately there's going to have to be public-private partnerships to do exactly that, where government is going to have to incentivize development around the idea of creating a socially minded city and then ultimately nation.
Thank you, Doctor. If I move to Mary Amy, Simone already asked you a question as well, but if I may add also to that, how do you think the UAE, how can the UAE play a role, or how can you describe its current role when it comes to a non-global challenge, which is financing the SDGs?
Well, I think it goes with leadership in all areas where any country has specific strengths, and that it can share its knowledge with other countries on those specific sectors. So obviously, the UAE has shown a lot of leadership in many different aspects, whether it's sustainable cities or all the different aspects of digitalization that can be applied in infrastructure. And all this, of course, is absolutely essential to reduce costs and to improve transparency, to improve efficiency. I think the UAE is already doing a great job at sharing this expertise, in particular through the organization of the World Governance Summit and this ongoing work that is done, as well as, of course, all the different actions through ODA and others to support in funding and in expertise those projects where they are needed.
Madam, if I may also ask you, can you share examples of where there were innovative solutions that our governments, or from examples of the private sectors, when it comes to financing the implementation of SDGs?
Sure. So there are many examples which are all of blended finance, where instead of giving money to fund 100% of the project, public funding is instead used as catalytic capital to fund the first loss that enables the raising funding from different private investors that have different risk appetite. So essentially using public funding or philanthropic funding to de-risk a project and therefore crowd in more financing. And the leverage can be really enormous. So this is really the key going forward to better spend the public money, in addition to, of course, all the work that needs to be done. And that's really what we're going to do as part of the finance cluster in the council, supporting the other groups, SDGs, in their projects, like, for example, the Health in Your Hand project, with which we've worked a lot with SDG3, and precisely using the platform, that digital platform that has screened so many high impact healthcare initiatives for the first mile that are already profitable. So they are business that can be financed by the private sector, but they need more funding to scale up, and private sector needs some catalytical funding to de-risk these opportunities. And so that's an example where we're going to be mobilizing public funding, philanthropic funding, as course as a private funding from banks, impact investors, asset managers, and the like.
Thank you, Mariam. Back to you, Simone. Very briefly, can you please shed more light on the Leadership for SDGs initiative?
Well, I was triggered by the situation that I sketched, namely that in many countries, governments are basically left to their own devices. And they have huge tasks ahead, especially if you look at the implementation of the SDGs, which is not an easy undertaking, right? And you have to move on many levels. It's about policy coherence. It's about getting your governance straight. It's about attracting funding for the SDGs for their implementation. So it's a real big job. And so the idea is to support governments through personal leadership development, entire governments and ministers individually, to help them become basically their best selves, both at an individual level and as a group, and both more on a technical level in terms of knowledge build-up, and through peer support. So that would be the idea. And I'm working with a few governments now as potential pilot countries. And of course, I hope to continue to get the support of the UAE. I think the World Government Summit is all about governments and the leadership of governments. So that's really, really important. Because if that doesn't happen, if that doesn't change, if the preconditions for change, for sustainable change, systemic change, have not been met, we can do whatever we want, and maybe left and right things will improve, but we won't be able to lift the entire world population and see to it that all those inequalities and injustices are being taken care of. And of course, women leadership is a specific focus in leadership for SDGs.
Thank you, Simone. Now I think we're very close to the end of the session, but I'd like to hear from all of you. Maybe I'll give 10 seconds for each one, just to reflect on your journey, or if you can tell us, how do you feel about your journey while being with the Global Councils on SDGs? Can I start with Dr. Robert?
This has been a particularly challenging year for me, as it has, I think, for many people. And to be honest, hearing the other people involved with the SDGs and the global councils has been a bright light for me. It's been something that's encouraging, just in knowing that there are other people who are committed to gender equality, to environmental longevity, and so forth. So I've really, really been encouraged by it.
Thank you, Doctor. Mariam?
I'd say it's been a great experience in terms of meeting really amazing people, and a demonstration of how tenacity and being driven by a common goal can help achieve a lot, and hopefully even achieve more in the years to come.
Thank you. Last but not least, Ms. Simone, how do you reflect on your journey with the Global Councils?
Well, I must say I've met amazing people, knowledgeable, committed, passionate, and I love passion personally, and I think that is already a big treat. I seriously hope that the Global Councils will continue to flourish and even strengthen, And maybe last 2 words, I would say sharing is caring. And I think that this is what I can also see that we all try to do. Thank you so much for being here.
So as we're coming now to the end of the session, it's been a pleasure to have you here, our distinguished panelists. Thank you for your great insights, your great contribution. And I personally look forward to be always engaged with you in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being part of this session. It's been an honor. And I'd like to hand the mic back to my colleague, Reem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malik. Thank you, distinguished panelists, for highlighting the importance of governance, collaboration, and financing in achieving Agenda 2030. And I think from today we've seen such a collective spirit, and we are getting ready to achieve Agenda 2030. Moving to our final segment, I take great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Abdullah Luta, Director General of the Prime Minister's Office of the United Arab Emirates, and Vice President of the Global Councils on SDGs, to share his closing remarks.
Today, we will continue this journey with the Global Council chairs and members that are inspired to further pursue within their councils, and to new additions who wish to contribute to this platform. I say welcome in advance. We look forward to the announcement of the opening of nominations for the new term of the Global Council's 2021 to 2023 at the end of this event. I look forward to welcoming you all to the 5th edition of the SDGs in Action 2021 to recognize and highlight the progress and the achievements of the 2nd term of the Global Councils. Let us support each other and come together for a better tomorrow. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I wish you all the best today, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your remarks and the opening of the 2nd term of nominations of the Global Council on SDGs. Nominees, you can now visit the SDGs designated page on the World Government Summit website to nominate yourselves to be part of the Global Council on SDGs term, which will last from 2021 to 2023. Once again, thank you to everyone who's joined us today and for the dedication and collaborative efforts of the Global Council members in shaping a better future. We look forward to welcoming you to our future events. And as a token of appreciation, a showcase of the Global Council members' certificates will be showcased shortly. Stay safe and see you soon.